May the best brand win with Scott Robertson's Music Biz Marketing Strategies. Now, here's your host, Scott Robertson.
Hey, happy Friday, everybody. You are tuned to May the Best Brand Win on Entertalk Media, the undisputed leader in music biz talk. And I am Scott, your host, and a man who, after seeing the year we've had with the pandemic, fires, riots, this weekend we had an earthquake in Los Angeles. I would not be one bit surprised to see Godzilla come out of the Pacific Ocean and just finish the friggin' job already. It'd be awesome. It's like, come on, world. What else do you got? What else do you got? Our producer, Paul, of course, is still sleeping off the last earthquake from Friday in a secured bunker somewhere. He's still producing the show in a touchless, contactless, workless type of environment. That's the same way that he likes to get his chicken sandwiches from Popeyes, contactless. And I agree, Paul, that is one fine sandwich. That is a good sandwich, Paul. So who am I? What do I do? And how do you reach me? So I run a marketing communications and PR firm in Orange County, California called Robertson Communications. You can find me on Twitter at RobertsonCom. You can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/RobertsonCom, or just go to the website, RobertsonCom, 2M's like communications.com. Or you can always send me an email to Scott@RobertsonCom, 2M's like communications.com. Always find me there. I always love to hear from the listeners and see what you guys are doing in your journey of marketing and how that's treating you. Right. And this year I'm a certified story brand as well, so I can create even better brand stories, website wireframes, sales copy. You know, as we know on this show, what's usually broken in marketing is the message. And so I can do that even better now. Well, you tuned into a good one. This is episode 167 of the show, and we're going to talk about retail. Something we haven't talked about on the show very much, but if you've shopped or eaten at a mall or a strip mall in your life, you have seen Sheldon Pont's work. He's a master of real estate for retail operations, including Morton Steakhouse, Polo Ralph Lauren, Kenneth Cole, Cartier, Dunkin Donuts, Baskin, Robbins, Little Caesars. Sheldon manages huge real estate projects, and he's frequently quoted in the media for his expertise in real estate development. He's going to join us today, talk a little bit about retail in the USA and the world. And, of course, together we're going to hit winning and losing. And then before it's all over, Sheldon's going to leave you with some tips and some trends going on in retailing so you can be just a little bit smarter than you were when you came in. So anyway, please welcome to the show, Mr. Sheldon Pont. Sheldon, thanks for being here.
Scott, it's wonderful to be here, and thanks for the opportunity to talk about one of my favorite subjects.
Yeah, absolutely. Retail is something that affects, it affects everybody, but, we really haven't dug into it too much, on this show. And so I thought, after speaking to you, I thought it'd be a good idea to dedicate an episode and just kind of talk about retail. So, but before we get into that, your background is fascinating. You're a lawyer. You're involved in big real estate development. How did you get started on this path, and how did it lead you here?
After college and law school, I had the serendipitous good fortune to go to work for a major mall developer who was up there on Mount Rushmore with the 4 or 5 people that really started the mall business in the United States. And I found that I had an interest and an aptitude for paying attention to tenant mix because, as some of your audience may know, shopping centers are the singular forum where merchants typically pay a percentage of their gross sales to the landlord over an agreed upon negotiated threshold. So it's all about tenant mix and trying to optimize sales, bring the cash register in old world speak for both the merchants and the landlord. So again, I had the good fortune to work for someone who paid attention to that, and I really wound up learning at the feet of the master how to put the mosaic together, and have carried that DNA throughout my entire career, whether I was working on a mall or a neighborhood strip center or downtown urban real estate. And,
yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, you have a fascinating background. Like I said, at the end, I'll give you, the audience may want to connect with you and hit your firm's website or connect with you on LinkedIn or something. But, I want to talk about retailing, and obviously, you're the expert on it. How is retailing doing through this pandemic?
You really need to, in my view, kind of look at it as sort of pre-pandemic and then post-pandemic, because
Sure. Yeah.
During pandemic, as the old saying goes, it's hard to sell from an empty wagon, and merchants, once the malls and shopping centers and retailing districts started to open, the problem was not enticing customers to come and park and go in the door. The problem was that when the merchants, who immediately had to go on sale, right, because they had been dark for 2 or 3 months, and that stuff, the merchandise doesn't get better with age, so they needed to sale and get rid of it. There was no a troop of trucks at the back door delivering new merchandise from the factories in Asia that had been shut down as well. So
right.
That was and continues to be an ongoing problem.
Our mall here, I was just at it on Friday, and not every store is open in Orange County. Not every store is open, and some of them that are basically kind of like the Lego store. They've removed everything from the middle of the store, and they have some sets already built up in these like open doors, like behind glass and stuff on either side. And you can walk up to the cash register, and then merchandise is kind of stacked to the side. But they have this huge empty, I don't know, like walkway is what I would call it. Mm-hmm. And it's just odd, right? Are you finding that? I mean, are you finding that more people are obviously in other states in the country, there are more malls open than here in California, but are you seeing some weird stuff like that Lego thing?
Yeah, I call it the staging for the retail stores has obviously been modified dramatically, and I joke that's why you're finding, coupled with the lack of availability of replacement merchandise, resulting in the mannequins, the red and blue socks and tops that don't match bottoms. It's kind of a scramble to kind of put things together. But creative, resourceful merchants are finding a way to cope, and customers tend to be, rather tolerant. You can't sustain that kind of Stevie Wonder, Ray Charles school of merchandising for too long. But for the most, listen, shopping is still the number one form of entertainment in the United States. So people are surprisingly tolerant of the ever-changing landscape and the hurdles that their favorite merchants are dealing with.
And in downtown Disney, my wife and daughter go there a lot. They have virtual queues for almost every store, so you can't just go in the store. First of all, you have a virtual queue to get into downtown Disney shopping area. Then once you get in there, once you've crossed all those obstacles and all that crap, you come in there, and then they you have to sign up for like a virtual queue, and they text you when there's enough room for you in the store. Right.
Well, there's certainly an artificiality to it. It messes up with the impulse quotient of retailing, and people feel 100% comfortable. By the way, it's an ongoing challenge for merchants. So they've struggled through these first 2 or 3 months of getting back open. So what are you doing for those merchants who have capital but ordering, merchandise going forward? What season is the merchant ordering for? Fall, winter, next spring?
Yeah.
When is this going to be over? And even if the crystal ball is clear enough, how much inventory should they be ordering? So these are really kind of irresolvable problems for the moment. I mean, we'll work through it in the next 9 to 12 months, but we're in this sort of awkward transition stage from, pandemic when the lights were out to, sort of slowly, flickering the lights back on to when they'll ultimately be shining bright in 12 or 15 months. So it's a difficult period for merchants, and at least for the moment, the retailing consumer seems to be reasonably accommodating and tolerant.
Yeah, absolutely. What percentage of sales are being done online versus offline, right now in general?
Well, again, let's talk 5 minutes pre-COVID.
Sure.
So, during COVID, it's that's a tough standard to try to say when your lights are off and you're not, the doors aren't open. But 5 minutes pre-COVID, and I think this will come as a surprise to many, if not most, of your audience. A shockingly 13.9% was the total amount of retail sales done in the 12 months immediately preceding COVID on the internet. 13.9%. Most everyone would have said, gee, it's, on the low end, 30, 35%.
Sure.
The average response probably would have been more in the 50 to 60% range. And invariably, because here in California, we live a little bit of a distorted reality. Yeah. And someone will say, well, gee, in my house, it's 90%. The UPS driver just parks the van in front of my house and drops off shipments on my porch all day long. But it's only 13.9%. And that growth curve is pretty much flattened out. Scott, it's not 13.9 on the way to 23.9. And if you think that we're aberrant in the U.S., in China, which is the biggest internet market in the world, it's only 15.3%. And that growth curve is also pretty much flattened out. So the fact, and as to those percentages, yes, in the U.S., Amazon is 48% of that 13.9%.
Sure.
I'm sure Amazon is on the trajectory, they could be 75, 80% in a year from now. But collectively, the whole category, e-retailing, is only 13.9%. But I think it's shocking to most people. By the way, to that point, it's all about omni-channel. Merchants have found that they really need to be every place. In other words, even the digital natives, those pure internet-only merchants, started to open their own brick-and-mortar stores because they're not satisfied getting a piece of that 13.9%. That's really not the way to scale your business. So there's this whole kind of omni-channel, which means that you basically need to be everywhere today if you're in retailing, online and internet. And so it's just it's ever shifting sands, but e-retailing very important, but not, and yes, there's been tremendous casualties of brick and mortar stores, no question.
Sure, of course.
And thousands of stores, closed pre-pandemic. But just very shortly, if the zip code and the shopping center or the street where those retail stores was strong enough, landlords were able to replace those underperforming or defunct stores typically in 9 to 12 months. And that was reduced down to 6 to 8 months. So again, brick and mortar is not going anywhere. It's just sort of the scorecard is shifting new players, and the look of the shopping centers and the streets is ever evolving.
No doubt. At my old job, when I was working with NAM, I got some visibility for the first time in my career about sort of the plight of what it's like to be a mom and pop retailer selling musical instruments. And man, it's a really difficult business to run. It's a really difficult business to run and make profitable. And so you would think, if you look at the history of the music products industry, for example, you would think that there wouldn't be any more music retailers. But what we always found was that for every store that goes out of business, there's at least 2 folks working in a job that they hate, and they had this crazy dream of opening up a music retailing store. And hey, wouldn't that be great? And I wouldn't have to work, do what you love, and you never work in a day in your life. And of course, that's BS. And because running a retail store is extraordinarily hard. And I don't think that most people have quite the visibility of understanding how many challenges most retail businesses face. I mean, obviously, you come face to face with that every day. So
to ratify what you're saying, I think the 2 best examples of that would be record stores and bookstores, which are fast on the way to implosion and extinction as a result, pretty much single-handedly result of Amazon. But those, the record stores have, and the Blockbusters of the world, those segments have really cratered. But the neighborhood bookstores have just by hook or by crook or serendipity, managed to keep their head above water to the point where it's really now a viable merchandising category, notwithstanding the dominance of Amazon. So if you're creative and resourceful and motivated in a particular category, there is life even in the presence of Amazon. Just one final point, and then we can happy to give you the mic back. A couple of great examples on this. I'll call it non-dominance of e-retailing. The four biggest and most popular women's clothing stores, discount clothing stores, TJ Maxx, Marshalls, Ross Stores, and Burlington Coat. They are they together collectively do about 80%. They have all summarily gotten out of e-retailing, shut it down totally.
Wow.
I mean, it makes a huge statement. I mean, they're banking on brick and mortar 150%. So to me, that's a very telling comment and just ratifies the fact that as important as e-retailing is, it's not the end all and be all in retailing.
That's interesting. Well, let's talk about the holidays for a second. So obviously, retailers make up their whole year in the holiday season. Everybody knows that. What are your predictions for holiday sales at retail in the ridiculous year that is 2020?
I was hoping you weren't going to ask that question because I pulled my crystal ball out of the mothballs, and it's a little murky. But I try to stay to my department, in the hospital. But the smart money, the Wall Street folks and the think tanks and the retail consultants say, and again, this may be somewhat of a surprise, and retailers always talk comp sales. What are the sales this year, versus the immediate, the prior 12 months? The general consensus is because of pent-up demand on the part of consumers, that it will be flat, in other words, meaning comparable sales versus Christmas, Thanksgiving to Christmas 2019 versus 2020. So flat to maybe up 1% to 2%.
What do you think about on the video game side of things, which we cover sometimes on the show, the two hardware introductions that are coming? Microsoft has an entirely new platform that's coming, and PlayStation has the PlayStation 5. Both of those coming out of retail this year. They even talk about there might not be enough units to meet the demand. Everything I've seen has said that. Any thoughts on that?
Can I humbly, is it okay to plead insanity and say that as a guy who's over 21, I don't, personally or sort of professionally swim in those waters. So I'm, it's tempting to weigh in, but my opinion would be, no more valuable than the guy you pulled off of the street. I will say to you that, obviously there are winners and losers in every cycle. Sure. During COVID and certainly during the holiday season, the leading winners have been Target, Walmart, Best Buy, and Home Depot, who have not only survived but thrived and increased their market share and also their percentage of the internet business. So again, nimble, creative, resourceful people with capital or financial backers are able to navigate, the choppy waters, and those are among the leading companies that are well positioned to not only have survived and thrived COVID, but also going into the holiday season and beyond.
Right on. So what are you working on right now? You're in San Francisco, which is where your offices are. Yes. You're all over the place. But what do you have on your desk right now?
Well, two things. It's a topic for another discussion. But my activities throughout my career have really been throughout the U.S. I've done projects close to 300 centers in 32 states and then 6 countries overseas. So I'm involved in something in Asia right now. An actually exciting project in Singapore. That if your audience saw Crazy Rich Asians, this project was featured in the project, the Marina Bay Sands, which was done in '06, and we're now expanding it, adding another hotel tower and a couple of more stores and restaurants. So it's a chance to correct my mistakes, from 14 years ago, and quote unquote re-merchandise the project and give eviction notices to those who. And it's a successful project, so we have the good fortune to be sort of disinviting some merchants from the party and bringing in other people who were standing on the sidelines, waiting. And the other thing is, and we're all living with this, the whole renegotiation of leases, whether it's office leases, apartment leases, or in my case, retail and restaurant leases. Some people are fortunate enough to own their own building. I'm like everyone else. I pay rent, for my office.
Sure.
The audience does as well. And so I'm vigorously involved in that. And my admonishment to your audience, and I can't say this strongly, is that whatever deal you're able to effect, whether you're a landlord or in my case, a retailer or a restaurateur, make sure, I can't stress it strong enough, that you have the buy-in of the lender to that lease modification, even as whether it's a couple months rent abatement or a couple months free rent or extending the lease, because what's happening, 99% of these leases in healthy real estate have a provision in the mortgage that the lender has to approve any even the smallest modification. So and I insist on that with whether I'm representing a landlord or a tenant, although never in the same transaction. And I'm hearing anecdotal reports from my colleagues of many leases where both the landlord and the tenant are not paying attention to that, and they're heading for a train wreck. So I can't say strongly enough to your audience, make sure whether you're handling the renegotiation yourself or having an agent or your attorney or your financial planner, whoever is in your corner, to get the pre-approval of the lender. Otherwise, you're really, pardon the expression, sort of shooting craps, rolling the dice, hoping that the deal won't get upended, 3 or 6 or 9 months from now by the lender. So it's keeping me busy getting my clients to, Sheldon, that's not important. No, it is important. It is, because what seems to be okay today may not be, quite so okay 6 or 9 months from now.
Oh, absolutely. Well, the audience is getting a lot out of that. And, you guys are smart because you're listening to May the Best Brand Win on Entertalk Media, the undisputed leader in music biz talk. Come on back, and Sheldon Pont and I are going to talk about who's winning and losing this week in marketing. And then in segment 3, Sheldon's going to give us some tips and tricks. So anyway, come on back, and we'll see you in a few minutes. Hey, everybody. Happy Friday. You were tuned to May the Best Brand Win on Entertalk Media. I'm still Scott, your host, still hanging out with the amazing Sheldon Pont from the commercial real estate world. Thanks for hanging with us, Sheldon. Really enjoyed the first segment. It was great. So let's talk about a few things that are going on in the world of marketing. As we always do in segment 2, we always talk about who's winning and losing. And there's a couple of things we should probably talk about. First of all, let's talk about Snowflake, which is the biggest software IPO ever. So basically, Snowflake, which is a cloud data warehousing business that is extraordinarily vague and probably does all kinds of creepy stuff. It has the backing of Salesforce and Berkshire Hathaway, and it is set to go public in what is going to be the biggest software IPO ever. So that's saying something. It's going to be on the stock exchange under the ticker symbol SNOW. It's from a communication standpoint and marketing standpoint, it's pretty amazing that you would have IPOs, doing really well, and certainly doing really well, with the environment, the way that it is right now, which is kind of uncertain. So it's kind of interesting. But Snowflake will be valued at, and get this, at $120 a share price. Snowflake will be valued at $33.3 billion with a B So it will be worth more than companies like Bank of New York, Hershey's. It'll be worth more than Allstate. It'll be worth more than Walgreens and also Travelers. Lots of stories about this today, but if you want to check out more, make sure you check it out at CNN.com. Anyway, all kinds of winning. From my perspective, from a marketing communications standpoint, when you've got a headline that says you're going to be the biggest software IPO ever, I think that's winning. I think that they are going to need to, from a communication standpoint, they're going to need to be a lot clearer about what they do with data. When they talk about being a cloud data warehousing firm, that doesn't strike me with a great deal of confidence that they might be behaving in an ethical manner with data. That sounds like that they could be headed down the path of using data improperly and getting spanked for it later, and all of their clients as well. I don't know. What do you think, Sheldon? You know anything about Snowflake? What do you think about the IPO?
I have most of my assets parked in the shopping center arena over the years, and also backed a few retailers and restaurateurs. So I try to, as the old saying goes, stick close to my knitting. And I don't question, the projections, the initial, IPO value. The question is, the landscape, the investment business landscape is littered with lots of casualties over the year. So I'm not doing any projections, but I just think investors need to be cautious and not sort of, as the old saying goes, kind of put all your eggs in one basket. Mm-hmm. Because even those, I remember when Facebook went public and they got hammered the first 6 or 9 months. True. People thought that, maybe the party's over. They were strong enough and well capitalized enough and, influential enough to weather the storm and go on to great economics. But if people like that, who had tremendous backing and the endorsement buy-in of Wall Street, met with some resistance, it's just a word of caution.
Sometimes, I can see it.
Sometimes standing on the sidelines. By the way, if I can just share one anecdote with you, you mentioned about the data.
Please.
I have had a involvement in quite an interesting deal that's hopefully just about to close. It's been in the Wall Street Journal a number of times in the last few months where Simon, the big mall developer who owns Fashion Valley down your way, San Diego, biggest mall developer in the country, was trying to buy all the 800 plus JCPenney stores out of bankruptcy. Purely as a defensive measure, because they've got Pennies as anchor tenants in about 160 of their malls nationally.
Yeah, no kidding.
So they were obviously felt quite jeopardized by closure. The translation, probably half of the tenants in the mall have co-tenancy clauses where if a department store closes, they can close.
Wow.
Or terminate their lease.
Sure.
How scary is that for a landlord, even in a healthy project? So this was sort of purely a defensive posture on the part of Simon. And so you'd say, well, what is Amazon's interest to, competing with Simon, trying to buy all these JCPenney's? So what do they need all these? And again, here you go, this sort of omni vision, the internet meets brick and mortar. Mm-hmm. What's Amazon intended to do was to convert many of the Penny stores to Whole Food stores. Remember they bought years ago? A big chunk of the Penny stores would be, and again, you're a marketing guy, so I'm speaking to the guru here, would be what you folks refer to as last mile fulfillment centers. Sure. Translates to fancy speak for warehouses. Because the industrial landlords in the United States, which has been one of the few healthy segments in commercial real estate in the last 2 or 3 years, hasn't been able to develop enough industrial real estate to satisfy Amazon's appetite. So here, once in a lifetime opportunity for Amazon to have literally multiple hundreds of Penny stores throughout the country, mostly in urban and near in suburban locations. You know, these penny stores, with rare exception, are not 20, 30, 40 miles from city centers.
Yeah.
There's a chance for Amazon to convert these to warehouses, which will be closer to their customers. They can deliver faster and cheaper. And the third leg of the stool, as if those aren't enough surprises, Amazon is now in the traditional grocery business, separate from Whole Foods, by the way. This is out in the Valley in LA for new Amazon Fresh full-line grocery stores, 40, 50, 60,000 square foot stores, right across from Safeway, Albertsons, Trader Joe's, Ralph's, where they'll go. And they're not doing it for the grocery business, as you may or may not know, is a very challenging business. Profit margin less than 1% in a good year. So you say, why is Amazon doing this? It's all about data mining. Less than 2% of the eyeballs in the United States go to a Whole Foods store. Amazon's missing 98% of the population in the country, 2-3 times a week. So they want Mrs. Smith in Mobile, Alabama, Mr. Jones in suburban Denver, who is not a Whole Foods customer, in a Whole Foods branded grocery store 2-3 times a week, so they can interact, get the data mining, all the kind of stuff that's happening in the Whole Foods store. So it's a very interesting, and I recommended to Amazon that they stop, beating up the pennies and start joint venturing this, because they're just raising the price to buy these things.
Sure.
Plus, I have FTC kind of poking their nose in, restraint to trade.
Oh yeah. So
the deal was just approved by pennies, and they're waiting the buy-in of the bankruptcy judge, which I believe will happen. So again, it's an interesting intersection of brick and mortar meets e-commerce that never could have happened or would have happened 5 or 6 years ago. So it's ever-changing landscape out there. And back to my point of a few minutes ago, you need to be every place if you're in the retailing business. And Amazon recognizes that, ergo their strong interest in all of these brick and mortar penny stores. I just find that fascinating. That
is interesting. That's interesting. Well, let's move on to another story. So we got Citi this week, Citibank, introduced Jane Fraser. She's the new CEO. She's the first woman to lead not just Citibank, but a major U.S. bank. She's going to replace Michael Corbat in February. The company just announced. So the new CEO of Citigroup is going to be the first woman. So definitely winning in that, and certainly kind of a little bit surprising that there hasn't been there hasn't been a woman in any slot for any U.S. Major U.S. bank. So that's kind of interesting. What do you think of that? Sheldon, what do you think?
I think it's a long time in coming.
Yeah.
And
winning.
Kudos to Citigroup for being the first to step up, and I would expect their competitors to follow in short order. There's just too much brain power on both sides of the gender divide. To relegated, 50+% of the population to not having senior executive influence in a position. So
absolutely.
I think it's great.
Cities, all kinds of winning this week. We love that. Let's talk about podcasts for a second. So an interesting story came out this week about how podcasts, like this one, outperform traditional media and digital display on brand awareness, according to a new study. So check it out. Podcasts can lift brand awareness between 24 and 79%, or as much as 30 times the lift rates of other media channels, such as digital display, print, and linear TV, which average about 2.6%. This came from a company called Claritas that did the study. It's a consumer insights study. Retailers had the highest average podcast campaign lift of 79%, ahead of B2B at 77%, consumer goods at 63%, pharmaceuticals at 37%. We don't need to hear anything else about pharmaceuticals, good Lord. Automotive at 30%, and telecom at 26%, and insurance at 24%. Now, this they analyzed 834 million podcast impressions among 158 campaigns over 36 months. So I think we can all agree that podcasts like this one just kick ass, and they're awesome. And you know, all the podcasters out there have tapped this new vein, which is really performing well in terms of a brand awareness. So Sheldon, if your business triples because of this podcast appearance, there you go. Then you'll know. You'll know
only triples.
I was being conservative, be conservative about tripling, it's all good.
Yeah.
Pretty good stuff with the podcast these days. And then interesting, and like I said, interesting data of how it's outperforming other forms of digital media. And you folks are super smart because you were listening to May the Best Brand Win on Entertalk Media. Come on back, and Sheldon Pont is going to give you some tips or some trends in what to watch for retailing coming up. So stick around and come back for segment 3. We'll see you in a few. Thanks. Hey, happy Friday, everybody. You are tuned to May the Best Brand Win on Entertalk Media. We've been talking about retailing all day with the legendary Sheldon Pont. And Sheldon is going to give us some insight on some tips and tricks, trends, things like that to expect in retailing this year. So Sheldon, what do you got for the audience first?
I think the overall banner reads stay nimble and pay full attention to the ever-changing landscape that's out there. Things are happening so dramatically, so quickly. I don't think we touched on it earlier, but historically, if a merchant had an underperforming store, they would do their best to turn off the lights, at least temporarily. Sometimes it's less costly to pay electricity than it is to pay staff and try to sell merchandise. And now, again, because of the age of the internet, if the zip code and the location of the store are strong enough, merchants understand where their customers are coming from. Whether it's through catalog sales, internet, they see the zip codes of where merchandise is being shipped. And I think the Gap was among the first to be proactive in that area. They would selectively keep open underperforming stores. It seems a little counterintuitive. Why would they do and pay rent? Hopefully at a reduced rate, but even if not, if it's distressed real estate, maybe the landlord, wasn't amenable to reducing the rent. But again, zip code of that Gap or Banana Republic or Old Navy store was strong enough. They would keep it open as a branding, and I'm getting into your world now. I got to be careful. As a branding vehicle,
sure,
and to have customers, both existing and prospective customers, coming in, looking around, shopping, and yes, perhaps going home and ordering the merchandise online, and then being able to return or pick up merchandise in the store. So yes, there is tremendous attrition in retail stores, and many storefronts have rightfully closed. But it's surprising on a selective basis. Some merchants electing to keep stores open, and some savvy landlords would rather have. And again, I'm keep using the Gap as an example. Rather than trying to explain, to fellow tenants or new tenants, well, why did the Gap store close? Well, that's not a good sign, Mr. Landlord. I'm not going to come in here and pay you full rent. It's better for the landlord as well to have that Gap or Banana Republic store stay open, lights on, fully merchandised, doing some business, and to have closed business. So that's one of the things you never would have seen pre-e-commerce. And then in that same vein, many merchants, again, Best Buy and Target and Walmart being examples of opening their stores, saying to Amazon customers and otherwise, you can do your returns at our store. You don't even need to package the goods up. You ordered a blanket and you thought it was going to fit, it doesn't, and you've lost the packaging. So you take it back to Walmart or Target, they'll pack the item up, send it back to Amazon at no expense to the customer. Again, just little sort of anecdotal things of that whole kind of intersection of e-commerce and brick and mortar, whatever that brick and mortar merchant can do to separate themselves from the competition. And again, hopefully, Mr. and Mrs. John Q. Public who go into the Target store to return something from Amazon, hopefully, we'll buy something there. So it's quite interesting, all of the interconnections and the dynamics between brick and mortar and e-commerce. It's here to stay.
Absolutely. Our Kohl's stores in Orange County, Kohl's are the ones where they really have the Amazon connection. They drive store traffic with the Kohl's that way.
Great point. Kohl's actually good point for you. Kohl's was actually one of the first national merchants to adopt that policy, and they persisted with it because it's working for them.
Very cool. All right, so we're being nimble. That's our. So what other tips you got for us?
Again, I think it's sort of the flip side of the nimble coin about just trying to always be at attention to the ever-changing landscape that's out there, and not being so I call it ossified, the fancy word for kind of hardwired and unwilling or inattentive to making adjustments, when you need to. Just as a quick kind of a complimentary aside, there's about 1,200 plus or minus malls remaining in the country. And, only less than 400 are what we would all consider to be Class A malls. Fully tenanted. They've retained most of their department stores. And where they've lost a department store, they've been able to, replace it with if not a department store, because that's going away, another attractive use. They're doing just fine. It's those 800 or so Class B and Class C malls that have become really post-peak, where they've lost one or more of their department stores, can't be replaced. The store volumes of the inline tenants have gone down dramatically, and they've really, the brick and mortar, the dirt is really worth more than the brick and mortar. So in many cases, those many Class B and Class C malls that historically had been strong in the good old days are either being torn down or repositioned, repurposed. And do some housing, do some office, do some biotech, life science, and maybe just a smattering of retail, but not trying to jam the pipeline and refuse to say that there's no longer a need for 300 stores and restaurants in this particular zip code. So that's a situation where savvy landlords are making the adjustments rather than kind of digging their heels in and trying to push the rock uphill. So,
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, very, very cool. So what, you got any more tips for us? You got another one?
You've got what's at the top of my mind in terms of awareness.
Very cool. How about marketing? Obviously, you've sat in the boardrooms and done so many of these deals for these for these large properties. Is there a difference in how you guys approach marketing these things once you get them once you're rolling them out? Anything special about marketing that you do?
Well, again, I feel like I'm preaching to the choir here. You're the guru, but it's all about trying to differentiate yourself.
Sure.
From the competition or what what holds themselves out to be competition and create a value proposition for customers, and to constantly be rebalancing the tenant mix in the same way, and doing shorter term leases if you're the landlord, because in much the same way, if you walk by the Macy's store window or the Nordstrom store window and it looks exactly as it did 2 months ago or 3 months ago, let alone 6 months ago, you'd kind of scratch your head and say, gee, there's really nothing compelling, kind of bringing me back inside the store. So I think landlords and tenants have learned to operate on shorter term leases. Precarious at times, but there has to be enough self-confidence on the part of landlords as well as merchants to trust one another and to go with shorter term leases, maybe not take as much space for that store, take on that obligation, so you don't get inundated if the store is underperforming. So it's all, again, back to this trying to stay nimble, and to constantly be reevaluating the merchandising mix. And to your point on marketing, it's all about not resting on your laurels. And gee, things seem to be going well. We don't really need to pay attention, to marketing. That's probably just the time when you need to pay attention, when your back isn't up against the wall, and you can afford to. It's degrees of success rather than success and failure, even in a healthy project.
Oh, sure. Yeah, absolutely. Well, and you got to get, like you said, you got to get stores like Tesla and people and things, things like that are, that's kind of an interesting play at retail, right? They still have, in shopping in our mall, they have a Tesla store there where you can go in and, I guess buy your car and they'll deliver it to you later.
It's all under the kind of what's old is new, what's old is what's new, and what's new is what's old.
Yeah.
I'm long enough in the tooth that when I first got involved in this business so many moons ago, there were commonly grocery stores, even in enclosed malls, maybe attached to one end or the other, because the landlords felt that they needed to maintain that, once or twice or three times a weekly visit from customers. They then found that the space was too valuable to give up to a grocery store. But
Sure.
Those kind of uses are coming back mostly because there's vacant department stores, so the landlords are forced to become creative, and you're finding what historically was no longer a viable use in a shopping mall, whether it be a grocery store, are now being converted to whether it's the town library or the police department or a hospital. So again, it's interesting because consumers' tastes and expectations are constantly changing. So the really savvy shopping center landlords, supported by tenants, are willing to sort of reshuffle the deck all the time, and make the store again, I'm referring to the shopping center as kind of being my store. 100, 200 departments, make that store as relevant and interesting and alluring as possible. And that takes a constant reevaluation, no longer, once every 5 years, once every 10 years.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's great stuff, Sheldon. Thanks very much. So what have we learned, folks? We learned that retailing is alive and well and growing in the U.S. economy as we're getting back to business and heading into that all-important holiday sales season. Special thanks to my guest, Sheldon Pont. Fantastic. Spent some time with us here today. Sheldon, how do people, if people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
I welcome them to either check out our company website, Vandermade, VANDERMADE.com, or they can reach me personally at Sheldon, SHELDON, at Vandermade, SF, the initials, VandermadeSF.com. I would be happy to have a dialogue or be of any service that I can to your listeners.
Fantastic. Well, you heard it here. You heard it here first, folks. It was great talking about retailing with you, Sheldon. Thanks very much for your time. Thanks, everybody, and you guys have a great weekend out there. We'll see you next week with a fresh new episode of the show. Bye-bye now.
Thanks, Scott.